can't. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Tell him I can't hear good. Count to 10 and back. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. All right, do you want me to start off with this picture? Father, who was the first superintendent of East Union School. Let's start over.
Yeah.
You got me messed up because I didn't. This is a picture of my father, who was D.M. Wood, the first superintendent of East Union Cotton Mills, which was founded in 1900 and opened and throwed the switch to run the mill in 1904.
Tell us about what he did then.
They built the mill. Took 4 years to build the mill and get it ready to operate. The first 3 streets in the village was Freeman Street and Reynolds Street and Kimball Street. And then as they progressed, they built Haynes Street, Jones Street, and Cole Street. And then a little later, they went across the lake and built 3 more streets of houses: Hill Street, Field Street, and Murphy Street.
Why did they build the villages? Why did they build the villages?
They had to have the places for people to live close to their occupation because you didn't have cars and all to communicate. And so they built these houses, and they furnished the houses to the people free. They didn't pay any rent, and at the time that they were built, there was no electricity in the houses. And they furnished coal, and for years they lived there free. And then finally electricity came along and was put into the houses, and a few years later running water. Each street had a well before they had running water.
Tell us about the school.
All right, they built a school on top of the hill over there, a 2-story, beautiful building. And they used it for school and for churches, and even the grown folks went to school at night.
Now, I want you to go back and say that again and tell me why the grown people had to go to school. Start again with that. They built the school.
All right. The school was built on a hill, a beautiful building, 2-story, and it was built close to the mill and the people there. And then at night, the grown folks went to school because a lot of them didn't have any education. And then it was used as a church for the Baptists and Methodists. And then in the 20s, they built the church, which is on Freeman Street, and the Baptists used it 2 weeks on Sunday, and then the Methodists used it 2 weeks.
Tell about your father in the church.
And my father was superintendent of the Sunday school class, the D.M. Wood class, and it had between 300 and 400 members.
Did you have to go to church in order to work in the mill?
No, it wasn't compulsory, but he more or less asked the people to.
Could you talk about what it was like in the mill village?
You mean the life then? Well, of course it was rough. It was when this mill was built, and then the boll weevil came through, and
Just a moment. We're going to have you put the picture down now.
okay.
Thank you. Okay.
In the 18 and 19 and 20 and on into the 20th, the boll weevil just came through the country from Mexico. And it was people just starving more or less on the farms. Like the boll weevil had just rent the crops. And so they came to the mills and
Let's start again on that. We just had something here. The boll weevil came
okay.
from Mexico.
In the late 1819s and 20s and on through the 20s, the boll weevil came through from Mexico, destroying cotton, and the people in the fields and had the farms lost everything, and so they had to come somewhere and go to work. And quite a few people, 50 or 60 families, came to East Union, and they had big families back then, and my father hired them, and they worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the afternoon, and they had a place to live, and it was just a better life than they was having on the farm, and wonderful people. It was just one big family in the mill village. If one had something, they all had it.
Could you tell us about what they made?
They made in the mill the yarn, and way back in those days when it was started, it was yarn. It came from cotton and yarn, and then most of it was sold to Stevenson for thread. And they had outlets in New York and in the Carolinas, and even during the Depression, they run. But sometimes it was just one day a week. Sometimes it'd get down to 1 day, 2 weeks. And I remember going to the warehouse up in town, and the federal government had flour and all kind of food that they furnished to people. And that's how they lived through the Depression.
What did they get paid?
I would just have to roughly guess anywhere from $4 to $7 a week. Now, I mean, I've been told. I can't say for sure.
Now, you were how old when Roosevelt got elected? 1932.
I was 19, and I was 7 years old.
And when Roosevelt got elected, then they cut the hours from 11 or 12 to 8.
Well, a little later, that was in about 1936, 37. I remember a lot of plants said they couldn't do that and pay wage and hours and reduce their force down to 8 hours a day. And a lot of them closed their plants because they said they couldn't do that. But Union Cotton Mills was one of the richest little companies in the South. And they paid good dividends, and they paid the people. And then Christmas time, they had a truck that go around to every house and deliver fruit and candy. And it was just a good life under the conditions that exist at that time.
Do you remember the big time when there was a strike and they called out the National Guard?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about that.
That was in the early 30s. I think I was in the 3rd grade, and I looked out. Well, I'll start back and say, we were in Athens on the weekend to see my grandparents, and somebody called my daddy and said that they had a strike at East Union, and they had closed the gates and put locks on them. So my father got in the car, and we came home, and he went down, and sure enough, they had the gates locked. They had tents up around the fence, wouldn't let nobody in. And so in a couple of days, the militia, they called it back then, came down, and we were in school, and I was in about the 3rd grade, and I looked out the window, and I saw all these buses, looked like a bunch of just gypsies leaving. They headed out of East Union and went to Hogansville. So that's all I remember about that. But it was a sight to see them leaving down here when the militia came in.
You didn't see the troops, though?
No.
Now, what was the rumor after that? What did people say about all that?
Well, they had mixed emotions about it. Even my father, some of them that was in the strike, was from the mill, And my daddy let them come back to work. And of course, you're going to have 2 sides or sometimes 3 sides to anything. Your side, my side, and what's right. So, but we had no more trouble after that.
What happened to the people who did anybody get fired because of that?
Not to my knowledge. One of the main ones that I remember was a supervisor, and he continued to be a supervisor after it was all over.
Is he still around?
No, he's deceased now. But the main man that was head of what they tried to form the union, he was a big man in this county, but he never was able to have any more business in this county. He had to go to Atlanta to do business. But the average person that was in it, they held no grudge against those.
You grew up as the son of a supervisor. That's a bit like growing up as a son of a preacher almost.
Captain, it's so true. I have gone to school on Monday morning. I'd had to have a fight with 2 or 3, and I said, well, why have I had to have this fight? But my father, being a superintendent, he'd get on some man and tell him, say, now you got to shape up, or either you're going to have to move. Well, he'd go home and tell his family, well, this boy want to fight me, and so I've had a many fight, and I didn't know what I was fighting about, but I had to fight. But one occasion, there's a fellow there named Mr. Walt Bowie, one of the characters of East Union. Everybody knew him and everybody loved him. My daddy was strictly rough on whiskey. He did have no use for whiskey. And if he caught you drinking, you had to move. That was the rule. They knew it before they started. Well, Mr. Walt got drunk one weekend, and of course somebody told my father, said Walt Bowie got drunk, raised Cain over on a certain street. So Daddy called him up to the office and said, Walt, you get drunk? Yes, sir. He said, well, you know the rules. You're going to have to move. And says, as soon as you move, says you can come on back to work. So Walt went home and he moved. He come back the next day and says, Mr. Wood says, I moved. He says, all right, Walt says, go to work. But he turned around and said, Walt, where'd you move to? He says, cross the street. So we all just had a big time. We'd fight some, we'd love some, and everything run smooth. And it was no money, but we didn't know what money was no way. We never had any, so we wasn't used to it. But we were all happy.
Weren't you kind of rich compared with most people?
I didn't know, because a nickel, if I got a nickel, I went to the store and spent it, and that was it. I trapped rabbits and made brush brooms and sold them, and that was my money. And it was a big family of us, and my father, I had a brother in Tech in 1931, 2 and 3 and 4, and I had a sister, two sisters in nursing, and so if we had any more, we didn't see it.
Now, could you pick up that picture again? Hold it on your back the way you did. And start over just as though we hadn't done that, because you're all loose now. You got light in your face. You're doing fine. So start off and tell us, this is a picture of, and so forth.
This is a picture of D.M. Wood, my father. It was made in 1915. He was the first superintendent of East Newnan Cotton Mills, which was started in 1900 and completed in 1904. And he throwed the switch to start the mill in 1904.
Beautiful. That's great. Yeah?
We do that from a while. Now, Woody, the first time you told me that story, you showed me how we pulled that switch. So this time when you tell me that story, pull that switch.
All right, you through with the paper, picture.
Uh-uh.
You want me to start all over again?
Yeah, but and listen, when you talk about your daddy, you say my daddy, don't you?
I think so.
Well, you say it again. Say my daddy. Okay.
You want me to sound like,
Well, you sound like you did this morning. I'm joking. All right.
you ready?
Yeah.
Give me a clue. What did I say?
We were talking about when your father came here and opened up the mill and
All right.
pulled the switch.
All right. This is a picture of my daddy, made in 1915. He was the first superintendent of East Newnan Cotton Mills, which started building in 1900 and completed in 1904. And he threw a switch to start the mill. Is that what you want?
Yeah. Okay.
You didn't tell me what your daddy's name was.
That's right, sure did.
So I'm going to ask you to tell that story again.
All right.
All right? And don't worry about being so formal. Just spit it out.
This is a picture of my daddy, D.M. Wood, who was the first superintendent of East Newnan Cotton Mills, which was started in 1900 and completed in 1904, and he threw the first switch to start this mill.
Okay, now tell us what your father did. Tell us what your daddy did in the mill.
He was a superintendent, which was, am I right now?
Yeah.
My daddy was.
My daddy was the first superintendent of the mill, which what they call today was a manager who was in charge of the whole operation.
You go ahead. Tell us what kind of a day he had.
All right. In those days, you went to work at 6 in the morning till 6 in the afternoon. And that was 5 days a week. And then you worked till 12 o'clock on Saturday.
Now, explain that your father and your daddy and your
My daddy came to Newnan from Athens, Georgia. And he moved up on Murray Street in the Old Mill Village and lived there until 1904 when they had this mill ready at East Newnan. Then he moved to East Newnan on Freeman Street, and he lived there until he built him a house here on the hill.
Now, what was it like growing up in as the son of the supervisor?
All right. My father being the superintendent, and me being the boy, and playing, I would often have fights with the boys, and I'd wonder why, and then I'd find out that my daddy had words with them and told them they'd had to straighten up or get things straight. And then they'd go home, tell the family, and then I'd have to fight the boys. And but as a whole, it was a nice place, and the people were lovely. I mean, they were just nice as they could be. It was good people. They just country folks that had lost their farms, and the boll weevil had eaten up the cotton, and it was just a pleasure. I don't know of any other mill village like it, but they were wonderful. And
Okay.
Did you have the run of the village? I mean, as the kid of the boss, I mean, did you get to go inside the mill, and did everybody know you in all the houses?
for years, anybody would walk in the mill. But then insurance, in the late 20s, they put a fence around the mill and put locks on it. And that kept people out. I'm pretty sure it was on kind of insurance. But I know when it first, you could go in the mill and see your folks. It was just a family affair. I mean, the mill village and the mill, everybody was just like one big family.
Now we've heard some people in Newnan talking about lint heads. Could you talk?
Oh yes, I experienced some of that very so. People that worked in a mill, to my sorrow, was called lint heads. And one time I remember my father telling me that the stockholders and the main stockholders told my father that he was going to have to cut wages at East Newnan, that the kids in East Newnan was dressed better than the kids in town. And my daddy told him, says, no, says, I'm making you 100% on the dollar now, and says, I'm not going to cut them. He was offered a job at West Point, in West Point, Georgia, to open the biggest mill in the South. And he often said if he had ever made a mistake, that was it. But that's true. We were called lint heads by people, and not only East Newnan, but all cotton mills. The one at the old mill, Arnco and Sargent, they all. But
How did you feel about that?
well, when I moved from East Newnan to town school, I made a mistake. I went up there the first day of overhauled home, which all boys in the mill village wore. And like you say, it wasn't any money. You just had to scrap. And so I had a fight there the first day. And so my daddy told me if I'd done any more fighting, I was going to have to go to military school. And they called me a lint head, and so next day I got whipped up there and got scarred up a little bit and scraped up. And my daddy says, what happened to you today, Woody? I said, well, you told me not to fight no more, and I got whipped. So he carried me to school the next day, and he said, Woody, don't you start no fight, but I said, don't you get whipped. So from that day on, I was pretty well in with the boys up there.
And after you graduated from high school, did you?
Yes.
What happened after that?
Well, before I finished school, my daddy became ill. He was a diabetic, and this was 1936-37, and he had to retire from the mill. And he trained a man to take his place, and then about a year later, they called him, asked him to come back and help him out for a couple of years, which he did. And then my father lost his right leg and 2 fingers on a diabetic. And so he lived to 1946.
Did you ever think about going back into the mills?
Well, I worked there, and it just wasn't my cup of tea because I went to work at a grocery store when I was 12 years old after school and the weekend. And but I tried it. I left the grocery business and went to work at the mill. But it wasn't my cup of tea, and I went back to the grocery business, and I've been in the grocery business ever since.
Hey, Judy, is there anything else?
Well, yeah. Why wasn't the mill your cup of tea? Could you describe what your experience was there?
Well, it was changing. The war was coming on, and we went in service. And when we came back, things just wasn't like it was. And I just wasn't inside, I guess, so much. It just wasn't my cup of tea.
Could you tell us how your father was able to maintain all those houses and all those folks?
Well, my father he demanded respect. And the only way you can control him back then, young lady, there was one man that was sheriff, and whoever owned the property more or less had to protect their own property. And Union Cotton Mills owning all these houses. He has 165 houses at that time. Of course, a lot of them burned and a lot of them fell. But whoever was in charge had to be in charge. But all the people here, like I say, the people were so good, we didn't have a lot of trouble now. I remember my daddy talking about who was the sheriff then, and my daddy would call him, or he'd help the sheriff if he had to come down here and had trouble. So they just worked those things out.
What things?
Any disorders or anything that was violating the rules of the company or violating the law, then he would call the sheriff, and they'd walk and talk to the folks and get it straight. And if it had to be a warrant taken, then they'd have to take the warrant and prosecute.
Do you think people were afraid of your father?
I don't think they were afraid of him. I think the people that you talk to now that remember my father loved my father, and he loved them. I can just stand here and count the people. Now the McCullers, that was a big family when they came here from the country, down around Sonora and Star's Mill. It was 7 or 8 in the family that could work. Well, man, that was a cream of a crop to get 8 people in one family to work. So they thought so much of the McCullough family, they even built another room onto the house. And there was the Kimballs, there was the Brookses, the Rainwaters, and all of these people, Massengales, that came from the country during the Depression, and they found work, and they survived, and they respected my father. And of course, anytime anybody is in charge of anything, you're gonna have criticism. And I've heard my daddy say many a time, a man that does something is gonna get criticized. And if you never do anything, so you're not gonna have any trouble. That's it.